everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I am your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at Spidey comics from September of 1987.
That's right, and joining us as usual is G.I. Jolie.
Barely here, barely human.
Oh, no.
Woo! All right. Thanks for joining us. Don't worry, Jolie, it's just a cold. Okay, and also joining us is Bex Luthor.
I do have some extra horse dewormer in case you need it for anything. Not anything specific, but, you know.
Only if Joe Rogan endorses it. Anyway.
Who?
Anyway, okay.
Who's she?
Could you imagine someone goes, "Who's that?" Right to his face, like, "Oh, sorry, I've never heard of you before." He would lose his mind. I'm gonna go turn my heater off, sorry.
No problem. We'll fill in the gap while you're gone. Okay, so this week we are gonna review. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, just so everyone knows, yes, I did send the wrong link, so I hope you read the right comics this week, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of a big week. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but we have reached the end of an era, folks. This is the end of the Peter David, Jim Owsley, Tom DeFalco, Hobgoblin, Foreigner, Black Cat, Dina, and Alfredo era. This is it, folks.
So sad.
Not Alfredo.
Not Alfredo. Yes, sorry. I think this week is actually the last appearance of Dina. I think Alfredo does come back at some point, though.
Thank God.
So
Maybe before we move on, though, we should actually take some time to read some listener messages.
Sure.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. I thought we didn't have any listener messages.
We have plenty.
It's quality over quantity. They're just the best listeners.
Yes. We only read the best ones on the air.
Yeah.
And not all of them.
Who wants to
what
do
you meant.
the honors? I made the discovery, but maybe Josh has like a radio voice.
Okay, Josh, go ahead. If you do you have it handy.
You have to do it.
Yeah, Paul McGrew commented on our episode of The Hobgoblin Lives. He said, after listening to the latest Here Comes the Spider-Cast podcast, I reread Hobgoblin Lives. I'm not saying it is Frank Miller Daredevil, but it is nowhere near as bad as the podcast made it out to be. Stern had to deal with years of stories that defined his origin or his original version. He wasn't able to retcon everything and pick up where he left off. Considering that, I thought he did a really good job. Sometimes I simply don't understand why you guys seem to hate the comics you review so much. Yeah, honestly, I totally get where you're coming from. I think that for us, sometimes it's like Spidey fatigue, especially when a story might not be a great story all in all. But when you do an entire run of it and you have to do it for like weeks and weeks on end, it can sometimes be a little bit grating. So I don't know. For me, I was kind of hoping that Hobgoblin Lives was going to be the redemption. It was going to be the thing that like fixes this whole Hobgoblin arc that we kind of suffered through the 80s. And it, at least for me, it didn't quite do what I wanted. I didn't hate the series. I didn't hate that like 3-issue run. I thought there was some really great stuff in it, like MJ and Peter and Flash kind of, as Doctor Strange would say, Scooby-Dooing that shit to try to like figure out what's going on. I just think that the mystery of Roderick Kingsley was kind of weak, and the whole like twin brother and the wig and all that was just like, I don't know, it felt very forced together. Like there wasn't a better way to make that like mystery happen. But well, I do agree though. It's I don't know how he even did that after years of him not writing and not being able to finish his original story. So even getting that far, I guess, is something.
The thing is you didn't read the response, Josh. Someone else also wrote on our website, and this is what it says. It says, thanks for listening, Paul. I don't understand why certain people seem to hate the comics either. Signed, Mike L. Sorry. Anyway, we'll just ignore that one.
Yeah.
Delete.
Anyway.
Spam.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm a lone voice crying in the wilderness, but that's okay, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, too, for some of us, we don't have the nostalgia at times as well. Because, like, I've read some of these comics, but this wasn't around the era when I was reading comics. So it's not as nostalgic, I think, for me. So I don't have rose-colored glasses all the time when reading them. And again, it's sometimes when you read them so close together, it's like, you know, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Becca, you look like you have something to say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jolie.
Never.
Okay. Jolie, what were you going to say?
No, it's just, I just wanted to defend myself. And I think Josh is right. We all read these comics within our own contexts. And my context is, everyone's like, well, beggars can't be choosers. It's like, well, I'm not a beggar. I'm not begging for good I feel like I'm at most times begging for great comics. I just feel like there's like a certain level of it's Spider-Man. It should be good. They're hiring whole teams of mostly men
25-year-olds, yes.
to do these stories. It doesn't matter. I know 25-year-olds who are great writers.
That's true. Pink Floyd was like the late 20s when they did Dark Side of the Moon, so maybe there is no excuse. Anyway.
Yeah, Amy Winehouse was an amazing musician. And, excuse me, I got a cough drop in my face. And songwriter, you know what I mean? Like Adele, she's 27. Like,
wow.
Age is nothing but a number. Aaliyah, come on, people.
The Beatles broke up when John Lennon was 29. Good point.
You can have good stories. Do I have high expectations for things that already exist? Okay, yes, Paul, probably. But again, it's Spider-Man. I'm not expecting Marvel I expected more from Marvel Team Up. I'm not expecting any more Marvel Team Up at this point. It's like it should be good. It should be thought out. I just don't know how anything gets past editors that are like, how does it? You look at the company and you go, how did that get published? I don't know. I don't always hate it. I didn't totally hate that one. I don't totally hate all of them. And I'm not trying to defend my standards as being high or defend myself at all. But it's hard to love. It's been hard to love Spider-Man, and I'm definitely trying. Becca?
Nah, he's totally right. I hate everything. Fuck it. Sucks. Here's the thing. I don't like Ned Leeds or Roderick Kingsley being the Hobgoblin. I think they both kind of were weak. It was a weak reveal either way. I don't think the retcon fixes anything. It's just a different thing that happened. So I didn't like either of them, really. Paul's right. Well, here's the thing, Paul. This is why I review these comics. Because Mike pays me. So.
What?
Oh, Josh. Wasn't supposed to know.
Shit. No.
The hell?
Mike says, here's the comics we're reading this week. And I go, okay. And then I read those comics and I go, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. You know,
and
never
then you
know.
complain about why I'm forcing you to read them.
Yeah, forcing, even though I'm just choosing to do this.
Exactly.
Because I enjoy it, actually. And just because you don't like the content that you're consuming doesn't mean you don't enjoy extrapolating that content and reviewing that content. And also, it's not like remember the issue where Flash Thompson beats his girlfriend, or the one time that Peter learns these boys are roughing up the kids who burned down his apartment, and they're like, just let him get away with it, even though they tried to sexually assault a woman. That's the stuff that I have problems with.
Yeah.
Like actual problems with. But bad comic books, I've been reading bad comic books my entire life.
Right.
I like it. Dude, I'm a Batman versus Superman apologist, so
Well, the other thing, and I'm not talking about this user Paul, I'm talking about in the past there have been people that have been like, if you hate this comic so much, why are you reviewing it? And I'll say, how do I know if I hate it until I read it, until I review it? That's the whole point. if you just want to hear us, and I'm not talking about Paul. I'm just talking about other people.
Yeah, because I actually really appreciate Paul's comment.
Absolutely, yeah.
We do love you, Paul.
Yeah, I totally see where he's coming from, and I'm happy that he enjoyed it. And it's true, like, sometimes we are pretty harsh on the comics. And it's also easy to judge a comic today by today's standards when it's coming out like a couple of decades ago, right?
Yes,
so,
exactly. Yeah. I will say that even, like, I'll say one more thing about Hobgoblin Lives. When it came out, it was like, you know, it was like The Phantom Menace, like a sequel to something that I'd read when I was a kid. I couldn't believe it was real. And so when it came out, I bought it and I loved it. But now going back and reading it again, I didn't think it was that great. I'm just being honest, you know. But anyway.
And I think we did say, like, kudos to him for taking the things that had happened in those 10 years and fitting them into his narrative. Like, you did the best you could. But, you know, C-. You passed.
Yeah. I feel like it could have also have been better, and the story could have been pretty good if it was just like an alternate version. It's a 3-issue run anyways. I'm not sure if I said that during that podcast or not, but I think, it just tell like if you want to tell your original version, then do your own original, like, alternate universe version of how, you know, I would have written the ending of that story. So
I'm gonna have to say, though, I am grateful to Marvel for actually giving him the chance to actually retcon it and make it what he wanted, because we have seen alternate versions of events by, like, Chris Claremont and Louis Simonson where they got to do X-Men or X-Factor how they would have done them, but this is a rare time where they let the original guy come back. Now, granted, he was partly shackled by the fact that he had to, you know, incorporate all these other writers, you know, their own retcons into his retcon. So he was kind of shackled by that. But it's not all his fault, but I think he did the best he could.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you again, though, so much, Paul. We really, really appreciate the comment. Hopefully you keep listening and keep commenting. We definitely want to know more of what you think about the comics and the podcast. So please keep in touch. Message us more.
All right. With that, we are now going to jump, like I said, to the end of an era, the end of the Jim Owsley, Peter David.
Yeah, speaking of Hobgoblin again.
Yep.
We're going to start off with Web of Spider-Man number 30. Web of Spider-Man, The Wages of Sin. Ooh. Now, okay, so this comic starts off a little slow. Only because we again are seeing the events of the last few months play out in flashbacks again, which wouldn't be that crazy except for last issue. Like Web of 29 was this, right? It was essentially this.
Web of 29 literally recreated half of the scenes from Amazing 289. It was a disaster,
from a slightly different perspective. Right. So the fact that we had to recap again was kind of just like, all right. So anyways, we recap everything. Wolverine showing up, the arranger talking about a deal, the fact that Kingpin revealed who Hobgoblin was to Spider-Man, like all of this stuff. Ned Leeds, everything has been retold again in the first couple of pages. And we cut over to Alfredo. So, okay, yeah, also, last issue, we leave off with Alfredo driving off of the dock into the water after he's being chased by Hobgoblin. Alfredo is on the car phone with the Rose, and he hears what's going on, so he rushes out to chase after them, and that's where things are left. We see the Rose running into the street, going to the docks to help Alfredo. Now, we start off this one after all the flashbacks and everything. Alfredo is just back in the apartment with Gina, like, and they're like, I wonder where the Rose is. Like, they don't really care. We kind of get some, like, I'm sure Becca really liked this issue.
I did.
As the Rose and Hobgoblin's #1 chipper.
That's me.
We got some juicy stuff and information. We get also this really weird line where Dina is like, no sign of your best friend and my sort of lover, Richard Fisk, aka the Rose. And I'm like, whoa, is she like pretending to be in like dating the Rose just to get something? And then the next panel, she's like, I love him. He's the man that I love. I'm like, what is happening? The writing is so weird. I was so confused throughout this issue. I had to keep like rereading panels because the dialogue is just like confusing at times. So forgive me if I mess up and have to like go back. But so yeah, Richard Fisk is kind of missing. We see him go to a church, and he goes into the confession booth and starts talking to a priest as he is recalling the past events of essentially his own origin. So, he starts talking about how he was friends with Alfredo and he's always hated his dad. They've gone, him and Alfredo have been friends since like high school or something. And one day this dude comes up to him and starts asking questions, and it's Ned Leeds. And he kind of like gives him a little bit of information, then kind of brushes him off and tells him to leave. He goes on to say that like no matter where he went, Ned Leeds was there trying to get information, get like a scoop on Kingpin. So they would go on vacation together, him and Alfredo, and Ned Leeds was still there, like spying on them. They're like in the beach in Rome, like no matter where he is, Ned Leeds seems to be like on his tail. So then he starts going into information about his mother, how she tried to leave because of everything going on with the Kingpin, and then she somehow lost her memory, and the Daredevil found her and used his mom as like leverage to get the Kingpin to resign from being the mayor running in the election. So then Alfredo and the Rose decide that like enough is enough. We're gonna go back to New York. They got their like giant like building that they've created together. They start like a dummy corporation to kind of hide from his dad. They finally bring in Ned Leeds after like constantly stalking him. So now he is part of like the trio that starts the Rose's corporation. Then Ned Leeds brings them to like the Hobgoblin headquarters and is like, yo, what's up? I'm Hobgoblin. We're going to use this. Rose, you need to hide your identity. So they like give him his purple mask and glasses because no serial killer ever wears glasses, apparently. We do like a quick flashback to the priest in the confession booth, like, okay, go on, my son. And then again, it's just like recapping everything that's going on. We get kind of like some throwaway lines about how Richard Fisk runs into like some corrupt cops and folds them into the deal. And then Kingpin, and then they like gloss over the gang war that happens. Like essentially it's just like recapping everything that's happened, kind of from the point of view of the Rose. We see him in the rain when he shoots the cop. And then this is when Richard Fisk realizes that he needs to kind of run away. So he runs out of the confession booth and realizes that like he can't escape from who he is and what he's done. So we see an establishing shot of a big tower. Turns out that it's Kingpin's headquarters. We see him in his office and we hear a voice say, all right, you win, father. And we cut to Alfredo and he's got his mask in his hand and he says, I'll work for you. Finished. So yeah, I actually surprisingly really liked this one. Like I think that this was better than a lot of the comics that they're flashing back to. I really like Richard Fisk as a character. I think we've all kind of liked the Rose from the beginning. Like, he was a little weird how he just kind of shows up and is like a new crime boss, but like, I don't know, I think he slowly grew on all of us. It's a little strange that he's doing this confession thing. Like, it seems like a really weird way for him to recap everything.
Well, yeah.
I don't think he's ever talked about being religious or anything before, so it felt a little out of place to me, and I think that was kind of like the one thing I didn't really like about this issue. I think it could have been interesting if we could have just like gotten his perspective throughout, instead of like going back and being like, oh, you know, I was here the whole time, and I have a story to tell too. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, maybe a little too late, but no, I think that if anybody asked about this era of comics and who the Rose was, I would not send them to the beginning and tell them to read this run. I would probably just give them this issue.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
I really liked it.
I actually had the opposite reaction. I actually didn't like this issue. And I was going to recommend not reading it because I don't think it adds anything to the... Yeah, honestly, it didn't do anything for me.
I kind of agree that it didn't add anything, but only because it was mostly recaps, right? So it's kind of like filling in the blanks of like how the Hobgoblin and the Rose were connected and why they were even working together, because we thought that was kind of weird throughout. Where the Kingpin went. Maybe that was like told in like Daredevil comics where the Kingpin was, but for our Spidey run, we didn't get any of that. So it was kind of nice to kind of like see what was going on with him and Vanessa.
Well, here's the thing. I definitely like the idea of this issue because this is something really comics only do, you know, where they'll have, I mean, TV shows have done it too, where they just explain everything like in one episode, like they did it in X-Files where the cigarette smoking man explained his entire life and it all tied everything together. However, there was a couple things in this issue that really irked me, but the biggest one was the way that Ned Leeds introduces himself as the Hobgoblin, how he kind of just flies around and rips his mask off. And he's like, ta-da, great, ain't it? And like, Ned? And he's like, come on, Richard, don't look so surprised. You must have known about my recently finding this place, this equipment, so let's drop the games and get to work. I mean, there's such a thing as demystifying a really cool character, but I think that really ruined Hobgoblin if he wasn't already completely ruined, you know, to begin with. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't feel like it didn't ruin Hobgoblin for me, only because I feel like the whole Ned Leeds thing was already not really well done, you know.
And then even like, like, remember giving him the mask and like, oh, let's dye it purple. Like, that's cool, but we also know that, again, this is Jim Owsley smoothing over all the cracks of all these different writers and trying to make it all cohesive. And for me, it just didn't really work. But Jolie, it looks like you enjoyed this issue. What did you think of it?
It's gonna sound like I only agree with Josh, but that's because his thoughts and feelings precede mine most of the time. And he usually says things that I agree with, like I would not give anybody else any other comics except for this one if they wanted to know the origin story of the Rose. Or, yeah, the Rose. I liked all of the Rose stuff. I am here for him. I'm here for this character. Like, he's right. We kind of fell in love with this character over time. But to be honest, I didn't know much about him. And then while I was reading this issue, I was like, I really don't know anything about the Rose. But now I do. Look, oh my god, he's being boyfriends with his boyfriend on the beach. That's amazing. Like, he's straight baiting the women. I love it. And like Ned is there in a t-shirt and jeans. It's ridiculous. I don't really. It doesn't really matter to me that he's doing it in a confessional. It's logical, I guess. So it doesn't, because it's like a logical way for this kind of storytelling to kind of start off. It doesn't seem like, you know what I mean? It's not out of place or anything. I also love that we get a little bit more of Gina and Alfredo. We get a lot of bit more of like Dina's décolletage. Jesus Christ. But yeah, I did not hate this issue. I, again, need to reiterate, if you want an origin story about the Rose, just read this. I didn't care about the Hobgoblin stuff, like him unmasking himself to his friends, because like how else would he have done that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like this could have also been a better reveal of Ned Leeds' Hobgoblin than what we got. Like when we were told about Ned Leeds, he just died. It was like,
that was horrible.
You know what I mean? It was like after the fact.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like if something happened in the story where Spider-Man is interrogating the Rose and he's got to like tell his side of the story and what's going on and like finding out that way, it's definitely better than Kingpin inviting him over and showing him some documents.
That's true. I mean? I'll give you that.
So I kind of liked it. I thought it was a pretty great recap. What about you, Bex?
I love this issue. A whole issue about my boy, my small little skinny beanpole Fisk boy. I love Richard Fisk. Okay, like not just because he's part of my favorite ship of all time now, but I actually really like this character. I like that he became a crime boss, but didn't want to commit real crimes. I like that idea that they're still scummy bad people, but they think that they're not.
Yeah.
Also, this reveal of the Hobgoblin, my favorite reveal of the Hobgoblin. I love this. I love that they sit down with Ned and they're like, all right, Ned, we gotta take down the Kingpin finally. And Ned's like, really? Did you just find out that I'm the Hobgoblin? Is that why? And they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I'm the Hobgoblin. I love that he's just like, hey, boys, and he just rips up the mask. That's great. I think that's really funny. And it actually gives Ned a little bit more character as the Hobgoblin instead of just everyone was saying, oh, Ned, he went crazy with this story, but now you're actually seeing a little bit he stalked these men for a while to get the information. He was already kind of a little, and then obviously the retcon of the brainwashing, but he was already kind of if you ignore the retcon, he was already starting to spiral out of there. And just the whole oh, well, I'm the Hobgoblin, see? And then getting into this turf war with Spider-Man is driving him even more insane. And even Richard Fisk is whoa, okay, buddy, you gotta calm down. Things get serious. No, I really, really enjoyed this. I loved the backstory of the Rose. I loved fleshing out his character and his motivations more, other than I hate my dad. It's yeah, I hate my dad, but I hate my dad because he's doing all these despicable things and I can't stand it. And his bond with Alfredo, I love some good friends. I love some good friends, some boy friendships. Those are some of my favorite friendships. And then you get a little bit of Alfredo backstory where for some strange reason he's really good at super gadgets and stuff. I don't know where he learned to be a spy, but okay. He's hacking into the Kingpin's building and stuff. I just think it's really interesting. Yeah, we recapped I'm just scrolling down. It's yeah, there's a big recap of the gang war. And I was oh yeah, Punisher was there for some reason. I remember. Thanks, Richard. I would have forgot all about that.
He kind of even says it like that too, Kingpin or the Punisher even shows up. It's
the Punisher came out of nowhere. I actually forgot this whole splash page. Hammerhead was there. The Blue Boys. Forgot about the Blue Boys. Punisher. Silvermane was killed in an explosion in a terrorist attack. Right. I was oh yeah, that all happened. And then just him breaking down about killing that cop. Kind of I was oh, Rosie boy, it's okay. Didn't mean to. But yeah, I'm excited to see where this character's gonna go now. He's working for his dad, but obviously he has a plan. There's no way he's gonna be okay, Dad, you win. I guess I'll do crime now. No. I just want to see what the Rose might be dead, but I think Richard Fisk is still very much alive. and I'm excited to see that. And I am just sad that I'll never have this panel where they're all three of the boys and Ned's in his hobgoblin outfit just sitting at a table just talking about how they're gonna take everybody down. I love that. I love when characters just hang out. That's like my favorite thing.
Well, okay, here's the thing. The last thing I'm going to say about this book is there's one thing that's unforgivable, and that's the opening page. Where it's just Spider-Man standing on a ledge of a building. But by the way, he could have been saying anything, but he chooses to shout out to the heavens, "Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin!" I still can't believe it. We'd known each other for years. To think one of my oldest friends was secretly my most deadly enemy. And by the way, this is now how many months after Amazing 289? Like 3 months? And this is still going on.
Is this supposed to be right after he finds out? Like, is this on top of the Kingpin building? What is going on? It's so weird.
It is. Because it says this issue takes place right after Amazing Spider-Man 289 and Web of Spider-Man 29 and before Peter Parker 128 and Amazing Spider-Man 290. Yeah, we know it's confusing, but no one ever said we knew what we were doing. I agree.
Well, okay, let's also be clear. This is 3 months after Amazing 289. In little kid time, that is like a lifetime. Like, you know how much I did in 3 months when I was like 8 years old? Oh my God.
A whole semester of school.
Yeah, I'd make friends, lose friends. You know, if you're a preteen, you're dating a girl, you're breaking up with a girl. So yeah, that's a long time, 3 months. Anyway. Okay, back to the comic. That opening sucked, but I do admit I did like the ending that it ends with him working for the working for his father, I mean. Mm-hmm. And a little side note, this is an interesting little factoid. There is a kind of person that does not like suspense, okay? I used to know this girl who said she hated suspense so much that when she was reading a novel, if it was too suspenseful, she would skip to the last page, read it, and then go back and finish it so that she knew what was going to happen. So, because she couldn't control the anxiety, which I think is insane. Wow. But I don't have that problem, but I have another problem, and that's this weird compulsion to do stupid things over and over again. And one of the things I did was that when I got this issue when I was a kid, I knew that it was the origin of the rose, and I was almost like Tourette syndrome. I just instinctively opened up the comic to the last page and read that last bubble where it said, "I'll work for you, Father," or whatever he says. "Okay, Father," or "You win, Father, I'll work for you." But then somehow in my brain I thought, you know what? By the time I get to read the actual issue, I'll forget about that. But guess what, guys? 35 years later, that's the only thing I remember about this issue. So anyway,
amazing.
Yeah. So that's
I did that with the last Harry Potter book.
Aw.
I was like, oh, there's an epilogue? Go right to the end.
Damn.
Not that I
so
care
old.
now.
True.
Yeah.
So are we going to talk about the Rose going to the Hobgoblin headquarters to get a handful of some Hobgoblin junk? Or... Because that was a line that was said.
Say what? Where?
Like the second page. He's probably at Ned's warehouse and copped some of his Hobgoblin junk.
He misses him.
Look,
It just fed into our head canon. That's all.
Look,
there was something else too that when I was reading it, I was like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, there was another part. There was a couple parts of like sort of double entendres.
Yeah.
They were in love, and it even talks about how, like, Ned was distancing himself from Betty. Oh, why was he doing that? Was he falling in love with someone else? Maybe.
Yeah.
You know what, too? Becca, I think you were the one who said it was weird that Ned just shows up and rips off the thing, and he's like... See Rose? See Richard? I'm the Hobgoblin. You didn't know? That, I think it didn't even click that was weird because I had just assumed that they were sleeping together.
Yeah, so like obviously he would know.
So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. They've been seeing each other for so long now, so that it's just like, you didn't realize I was the Hobgoblin. I trust you. Of course he would share his secret identity.
My thought process is he's been sleeping with Ned, but he didn't know that Ned was also the Hobgoblin. Yeah. And maybe he's also been sleeping with the Hobgoblin. And then this was the reveal of like, oh, it's been me the whole time. It's like the Lois Clark Kent Superman thing where she's like, I love Clark, I love Superman. It's like, oh, it's the same person. Cool. Helps me.
And knowing that, or assuming that, and then knowing now that when he sleeps with the Hobgoblin does not remove his mask.
No.
For the physical act, which is kind of nice.
The Rose also has a mask now, too. So, like, I'm not going to say that every Spider-Man supervillain is super kinky, but, I mean, I watched Venom, so... I'm gonna say that, you know what, maybe they all are. Just a little bit. Which is fine. That's fine. And also kind of hot, so.
Okay, so let's final word on this.
Mike's like, stop ruining the things that are important to me.
I don't know. I gotta say, this was like a treasured addition to my collection for many years. I hunted it down to find it, but I actually didn't think it was that great. So I'll give it a mild recommendation only because it wraps up this storyline. But Josh, what's your final word?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think that maybe it kind of throws a wrench, actually, speaking of, into the Hobgoblin Lives story. I know that, like, Ned Leeds was brainwashed, but he had, like, some sort of free will at the same time. I feel like this story kind of makes it so it's hard to reverse that, because it definitely seems like he knows what he's doing, and the fact that he was still tailing Richard Fisk like through different countries and stuff like that. But yeah, again, I think that this is like a really good recap of a lot of the events going on. I really like the Rose as a character, so a whole issue about him that was like interesting and kept my attention the entire time. I really liked it. Some of the dialogue earlier on is very poorly written and confusing. Again, with like Dina saying that like she's like, nah, my so-called or my sort of lover, and then confessing that he's the man that she loves. So like, I don't know, sometimes the dialogue is a little weird and not natural, but other than that, I really liked it, and I would probably recommend this one, especially for people who are interested in these characters that are in the issue.
All right, G.I. Joe Lee.
For the first time in a while, actually recommend this one too. For somebody who lives outside, for the most part, of like the Spider-Man world and is only reading these reading these books for the podcast. Like, I don't read Daredevil, so I don't know what's going on with the Kingpin. I don't read any of the other titles. I'm just reading this one. It's nice to have just an origin story of a character all wrapped up in a nice little package. I can recommend this to anyone else who feels the same way about origin stories of side characters or characters.
Okay, Bex Luthor.
Speaking of little package, look at that Speedo that Richard Fisk is wearing.
Yellow!
Yeah. No, obviously I recommend it. It was so great. I do want to say that this is the last time we see Dina, ever.
Ever? Wow.
She never comes back, ever.
The love of his life.
Which is strange, because, like, clearly the Rose's story is continuing. But yeah, she's just done. I guess her and Alfredo go to sushi and he just leaves her there. Which, at least she went out in the hottest outfit imaginable. Bitch. I'm gonna give this comic 10 out of 10. Just a great push-up bra. Because, girl. Excuse me. Yeah. No, I love this. It's got my boy. I love my boy. He's sad. I love when my boy is sad. I love sad boys. I have a soft spot for them. You know me, Kylo Ren, all those sad boys. Sad, unredeemable boys. That's my jam. So, if you also love sad garbage men, you'll like this.
What the fuck was that? Okay.
Yeah, I love my sad. Look, there's something for these, like, little... You don't understand, okay? The girls on Tumblr, they love these, like, sad, broken, kind of bad guys, but, like, sympathetic bad guys. They love that shit. And when the boy is sad, extra great.
Okay.
Right, it's like the I can fix them type.
Yeah.
All right, on that
but fictional.
On that note, we're going to move on to Amazing Spider-Man 292.
Okay.
And I believe, Bex Luthor, you're going to tell us what this one's about, right?
Sure.
Okay.
You wouldn't know from the cover, but it is about love. So we left off the last issue of Amazing. Peter had proposed to Mary Jane, and she went, I have to go to Pittsburgh. Which he was like, that's not an answer, but okay. And then, like, the Spider Slayer shows up, and Alistair Smythe's like, gonna kill Spider-Man. And then Mary Jane's like, calls Peter and it's like, I need you in Pittsburgh. So he's like, drops everything, drops the Spider Slayer, goes to Pittsburgh. So now he's in Pittsburgh. And we get a great little splash opening of Spidey swinging in Pittsburgh and not knowing the lay of the land, which is pretty funny. He ends up at a hotel room. He makes a point of saying that he should shower, but then says no. Don't know why. Yeah, you should shower. You're going to go see the woman that you just proposed to. Maybe don't be smelly. But as he's in the hotel room, he turns the news on, and the news is talking about the Spider Slayer in New York and how it just vanished. I don't know what happened. Weird. And Peter's like, cool. Everything's coming up Peter. Like, that's strange. Glad that worked out. And then we flash back over to the airport where Alistair Smythe is being just bamboozled by airport security. Like, his greatest enemy is not Spider-Man. It is this airport. He's like, you better be careful with all of my equipment. Don't break anything. It's literally the Spider Slayer armor in these boxes that he's transporting via commercial aircraft to Pittsburgh to go kill Spider-Man.
It's just so please, it's fragile. And then in his head, he's like, those fucking idiots.
They don't even know that
it's essentially a tank.
Yeah, and I'm just like, nobody like checked these boxes, but whatever. Like,
such a weird moment.
The 80s were a different time when you were flying. You could just bring a whole Spider-Man killing device onto a commercial aircraft, and nobody would say anything. So Mary Jane calls him and says that she needs him. He's like, okay, but she doesn't tell him where she is. So he looks up her sister's address in the phone book and then finds her. And she's not at all like, how did you find me? But he knocks on the door, and she's super happy to see him. He walks into the house, and who's there but Mary Jane's father? Whatever his name is. Philip Watson. Yeah, Philip. She calls her dad Philip, which relatable. And then he's like, oh, you should call me dad. It's like, gross. You're gross. Like, ew. So they have a little bit of an argument about how, like, you know, he wasn't there for them, and then Mary Jane left, and blah, blah, blah. And so Mary Jane, like, walks out of the house, and she gets in the car. She's like, come on, Peter, we're going for a drive. And she tells this story about why her sister is in jail now. And her sister was in jail for stealing or attempting to steal some sort of book at the museum that she works at for her father, who used to be a professor but now sells stolen manuscripts, I guess. He's a thief, and he sells them. So for some reason, her sister was helping her dad to do this. I don't know why. So the idea is that her dad said, if you get me this book that your sister hid away when she got caught stealing, I will help her not be in jail. And Mary Jane's like, okay, sounds great. Nothing will go wrong here. So she tells this to Peter, and Peter's actually very supportive. Like, in his head, he's like, I don't want to help a thief, but, like, I also want to help Mary Jane, so we're going to help Mary Jane. And then she tells him that she loves him, and it's very sweet. So they go back to the house, and Mary Jane's like, okay, Dad, I'll help you. And she calls him Daddy, actually. I just want to point that out. We went from Philip to Daddy. Then we go back to Alistair Smythe at the airport, at the Pittsburgh airport now. And he has unloaded all of his crates at a warehouse that it was very expensive to rent, so that he can have a headquarters for his Spider Slayer armor. And he can't wait to get Spider-Man, because in the last issue he sprayed Spider-Man with a toxin that he can track. Sure. Okay. And Peter does make a point of saying he has not showered since then, even though I think it's on the suit. He does. He says, he's like, I haven't showered. And then he's like, should I shower? No, he doesn't. So, but I think it's just on the suit, but whatever. So they go to the women's prison where Mary Jane's sister Gail is, and Mary Jane and her try to have a conversation, and she's like, where's the book? and they get into a little bit of an argument. Mary Jane storms off, and Peter, using his smooth talking skills, I guess, manages to tell Gale, like, obviously, like, Mary Jane loves you, like, your family, like, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And eventually he gets her to tell him where she hid this, this MacGuffin.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks pretty downtrodden about it. Like, it's a touching moment. We go from that touching moment to Alistair Smythe just bashing through the warehouse door, not opening it, like you just rented this place. I'm pretty sure you have to put a deposit down, and that's gone. But yeah, for some reason he doesn't use the door. He just crashes right through his headquarters, and I thought that was really funny. So Mary Jane and Peter go to the museum place wherever Gale used to work, and they find like the manuscript thing that she had hid when she got caught trying to steal it. And Peter's like, uh-oh, my spider sense is tingling. Somebody's coming. And Alistair Smythe just punches through the wall in his full Spider Slayer armor. And Peter's like, quick, get out of sight, someone's coming. And Mary Jane's like, no fooling, eh? Like, just bashes through. So he's like, oh, he must have followed me from New York. So Spidey he turns the lights off, he shoots the lights out, and tells Mary Jane to get out of there so he can fight this big robot. Alistair Smythe sees her, is like, ah, yes, the woman that I thought was Spider-Man, which I forgot that
ever happened. Yeah, everyone
Yeah,
does.
he kidnapped Mary Jane and her aunt, and Mary Jane managed to convince him that she was Spider-Man. And then he finds out that she's not Spider-Man. But then the real Spider-Man shows up, because it was Peter the whole time, and they get into a little tussle, and Peter's like, oh no, there's civilians, gotta get out of this cramped building. So he like makes the Spider Slayer bust a hole in the wall, swings through and goes to the city, and he's trying to like figure out how Pittsburgh works. So he's like, oh, there's a bridge in New York. The bridges lead to the suburbs. Hopefully that's true here. And so he takes them to the bridge, and like they have a little scuffle on the bridge, as Spider-Man and his villains are wont to do. And so the Spider Slayer gets a hold of Spider-Man on his like throat, and he's like holding him under the water, and he's drowning him. Mary Jane's like, oh, I gotta do something. So she rams her car into the Spider Slayer, which 10 out of 10. And she jumps out of it just in time from it being crushed. So Peter gets out of the water, runs up to continue fighting the Spider Slayer, and he's got him like wrapped up in his claw. So Mary Jane's like, hey kid, give me your bat, and just bats the Spider Slayer to distract him enough so that Peter can get loose. And then, so obviously the Spider Slayer grabs Mary Jane. Peter sees this, gets out of his like confusion from the gas that the Spider Slayer uses to slow him down, the bug spray stuff, and gets the adrenaline to be like, oh crap, my not wife yet, and just totals the Spider Slayer, grabs Smythe out of the thing, and is like about to just bash his head in, and he goes, wait, and he just drops him, and he walks over, he's like, Mary Jane, are you okay? And I thought that was very sweet. And then he goes back to Alistair Smythe, he's like, if you ever come near me or Mary Jane ever again, bad things will happen, sir. So that's done. Peter says he's going back to the hotel to meet up with Mary Jane, and then they meet back up, and they go back to her sister's house, where her dad's waiting for the stolen MacGuffin. So her dad's like, here it is, perfect, opens it up, looks at it, and then Mary Jane's like, oh, is my sister gonna be, like, off the hook now that it's you who did it? And gets her dad to be like, oh, Gale was just a dupe. The poor misguided child was only doing what I told her to do. Without evidence, she won't get a light sentence as worst. And then Mary Jane's like, did you guys all hear that? She's called the cops. The cops show up, they're in the house somehow.
Chris Hansen.
Yeah. They're like, well, we caught you red-handed. And even Peter thought that, Peter was like very conflicted this whole time because he didn't want to help a thief get away. He was trying to think, he's like, how could I like get the thief after Mary Jane gives it up to him? But he didn't have to, because Mary Jane did the right thing and called the police. And there's a cute little moment where they talk about, Mary Jane talks about how Peter's good for her, and he's good, and she's good for him, and they're good together. So, eventually Gale gets out of the prison. She's got her, like, court hearing later, but I guess she's, like, on house arrest or whatever. Maybe she got out on bail. Who knows? Mary Jane says goodbye to her nephews, tells them that they should visit them in New York City, and then while they're waiting for their flight back home, Mary Jane says, yes, I will marry you. And that's it.
I like this issue. I
also like this issue.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Like there's a few things like beyond a couple of the moments that are obviously, 1980s standard corporate comic whatever criticism. The fact is that in this story, even though it was meant for kids, we get a situation, a choice that is not an easy one to make, right? And Mary Jane actually leads Peter to think she's going to make one choice, and the next scene she's like, I'm going to help you, Daddy, right? So, and then the fact that it ends with her turning her father in and all that stuff, I thought that was great. Again, the supporting cast being more important, like the supervillain could have been anyone, but the drama with the supporting cast was the most interesting thing, and so for that, I think this issue was really good. Josh, what did you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think that the Peter and MJ stuff is really great. Alistair Smythe is super corny. It kind of fits the tone, though, I think. The whole thing is very melodramatic. Both the manuscript missing and him, building this giant Spider Slayer robot. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It felt like a classic Silver Age Spidey comic. It was fun. Well,
and also, I personally thought that sneaking the parts in through the airport was very cool. And when he was like, "Oh, this is my medical something," I thought that was great. I love that stuff.
Yeah. I think it was a little corny, though. I feel like I laughed. I don't know if it was intentionally funny, but the fact that he was trying to pass it off as breakable lab equipment, but really he's
he's like medical components. Fa! In reality, they are the parts of my Spider Slayer robot. I love that.
It's so stupid. I love it too. Yeah.
And the people at the airport are like, this guy's got a whole Spider Slayer in these boxes. He paid the fare though, so ship
what are we gonna
do? Right, Jojo, what'd you think?
Oh, I liked it. I just thought it was a little bit for all the reasons everybody else did too. It's really fun. It's a really clean story for the most part. Other than the fact that, this is why Mary Jane settles for Spider-Man.
What do you mean?
The events of this is she's this is the conclusion. This is her growth. This is why she chooses to be married. It seems strange.
I didn't mind, personally.
I think if they would have been dating instead of marriage, it would have worked a lot better. I think it's just a really big step.
Yeah, and I think that's probably half of the problem that I have with that being the conclusion. It's oh, I see that we work really well together, but they've worked really well with each other for the most part up until now, all the time, really well. And then it's a really weird Peter met my parent story, and my one sister who I love but abandoned. It's just because there wasn't any kind of lead up to the answer to the question. It wasn't as spectacular.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I think I don't hate that they go from not dating to engaged, because they have so much history already and they've been dating for years, and they were kind of I know that Peter with different writers was always flirting with different people and was a dick all the time, but I feel like the thing that was missing was just a conversation between the two of Peter asking if they can pick up where they left off, and her saying, no, you can't commit. You can't seem to be Peter Parker and Spider-Man at the same time. Spider-Man seems to always win. So it's never going to work. I love you. I'm in love with you, but this is not going to work if that's how it's going to be, right? So then his decision to not be Spider-Man and put her first, I think could work, and it would be a good way and good time for him to propose. I just feel like there is that, like, that conversation is missing. I don't even miss them dating. You know what I mean? It was just, it does feel like a huge step because it kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and her saying no has always been about Peter. Mm-hmm. But in this issue, they make her. It's as if her saying no. It's an issue. Sorry, it's an issue with her. It's not an issue with her. She has an issue with the Spider-Man thing. Mm-hmm. This suddenly, like the conversation they have in the airport together, lounging together while they're waiting for their flight. She says, "I've grown up a lot. It took this incident for me to see that we would do well together." It's like, okay, but like, what about all that other stuff? All the other reasons why you said no, those have not changed. So that's the problem I have with this. Otherwise, it was a great, like, it was fun. Also, we're in Pittsburgh. Woo! Like,
yeah. How iconic would it have been if he didn't propose 2 issues ago and then she needed him, so he left being Spider-Man, and then in the airport she proposed to him?
Yeah.
After they both, like, grow, you know what I mean? I just feel like, yeah, the fact that he proposed like, because it's been years, like, he this isn't the first time he's proposed to her, right?
No, it's second, yeah.
So if they weren't dating, and then, you know, he's kind of like trying to start the relationship up again, and she's like, and then, oh, I gotta go to Pittsburgh, and then she's there, and she's like, listen, Peter, I need you, and he stops being Spider-Man and goes, and they have this issue where they can kind of like grow and work together. She realizes that saying no might have been a mistake before, and she, like, I don't know, I feel like there's a way to make it work without having to have like a year of them dating before they get engaged again. You know what I mean? It's just, I feel like there's just like a conversation missing. There's just like a small little thing missing to make it work. I don't think it feels rushed. It just feels like not incomplete.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Becca, you summarized the issue. You haven't given us your thoughts on it yet. So what do you think of the issue?
I really, really liked it. I don't have the same problems that Josh and Julie had with the relationship. I just don't think marriage is whatever, right? So that's on me, and mostly because he was just kissing the black cat like a month ago.
Yeah,
that's
so, like,
another
if that
issue
wasn't
Mary Jane had. So,
but the thing with Mary Jane is she's also non-committal, right? So like Peter kissing another, she was going on dates with other men. She was
Alfredo.
Like, yeah, and it's like implied that she sleeps with Alfredo. Like, that's not really an issue because both of them clearly were doing that. It's like her getting over her fear of commitment because, like, she's seen it not work out her entire life, right? But the fact that Peter is like, no, I won't be Spider-Man, I'll be Peter and I'll go to Mary Jane, is like, that's the eye-opener where she's like, oh, like, he's gonna put me first and Spider-Man not necessarily second, but like he is going to consider me. Like that's the whole thing, right? And then even when they're fighting the Spider Slayer together, and she so blatantly just is like, "Yep, I'm helping Spider-Man." Like doesn't do like a second thought about it. It's like they work well together when he's Peter and when he's Spider-Man. And so I feel like Mary Jane has she's finally gotten to this point where the whole man is who she loves now, and not just Peter, or not just like she didn't hate Spider-Man, but now she loves Spider-Man and Peter, right? And even like the whole thing at the end where it's like Peter was with her, even though she was gonna make a bad decision that he didn't agree with, but he was supporting her, and then she ends up making the right decision, proving to Peter even more that she is the one for him, because at the end of the day, she does with what she knows is right, which is what Peter does, right? Yeah, maybe there should have been, it's the actual proposal part. Like the, will you marry me? Yes, I will marry you. That seems a little lackluster. Like all the lead up to it, it all makes sense. But there's no ring. Girl, what are you doing? Like, not that you need a ring, right, to show your love or whatever, but it's just like, it's so, Peter just shows up, he's like, marry me, and she's like, whoa, what? And then after this traumatic event that they've both experienced, she's like, yeah, we'll get married. Like, it feels very, this is a big step, guys. Maybe put a little bit, yes, it's the correct decision, but like, let's not jump into it.
Yeah.
Right away. Maybe we should, like, your sister just got out of jail. Now your father's in jail. A giant robot tried to kill you. Like, let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's not the issue that we have, like, at least for me, it's not the issue I have a problem with. I think it's kind of like what preceded it that makes this feel maybe a little bit rushed, but
because it's a corporate mandate, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
they have to get married next issue.
Right.
Yeah, no, but I think that this issue is pretty fun. Like, I think it totally works. And I had a blast reading it.
Now, there's one thing we haven't talked about, and Gia, Julie, I want to start with you. There's a certain artist that drew this issue that went on to draw Spider-Man for the next 35 years. Alex Saviuk, what did you think of the art in this issue?
I actually really liked it. It is really good. I really enjoyed the poses. I really enjoyed the architecture. It's like a mix of, I guess the better way I can describe it is if you were to get an issue, like if this issue was published today, you'd be able to see every single brick on every single building in Pittsburgh. But here it's just the line work as backgrounds. And I find just line worked backgrounds are strong. It doesn't pull focus away from Spider-Man, who's just swinging around. Right, Parker?
Sorry.
No, yeah.
Never apologize.
Never. He's always allowed to have his opinion about the art, for sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And like, sorry, did he do the inks and the pencils?
Only the pencils. The inks are by Vince Colletta.
Okay. The inks on Smythe's hair are phenomenal. But yeah, I really like the art. It's a lot like Ramita, but
right, I agree.
But like just a little toned down. You know how Ramita has like a cleanness to the line. There's something a little more artful about Alex Saviuk. It's still really clean. It still has that look. But there's just something a little different. Like, it might be even in the clothing. There's just a few lines are interpreted different in a jacket or something. But, like, you can certainly tell the differences between his Mary Jane face, and Ramita's Mary Jane face. They're both beautiful, but Alex Saviuk's is just softer.
Right. Josh, are you familiar with Alex Saviuk?
I mean, pretty familiar. I don't know if I can think of like specific issues or anything, but yeah, he's been on Spider-Man for a while, right?
Well, he did 7 years of Web of Spider-Man. Yeah. So basically, he's gonna take over with number 38 and draw it until like almost the last issue, I think. And then he did the Spider-Man daily strip. In between, he did the Spider-Man, like, you know, the 90s cartoon that we're reviewing? He did the comic book adaptation of that show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So he's just
I don't think I've read that.
Yeah, like I want to check them out now. He's just one of those guys. If anyone's interested, Comic Book Syndicate interviewed him. You can Google Comic Book Syndicate Alex Saviuk and it'll come up. But he's a super nice guy, very talkative. We also filmed a Q&A with him where he talked. There was 4 people in the panel and only he talked. Probably to the probably like that didn't, you know, make everyone else happy, but he was so interesting it didn't matter. But sorry, Becca, I want to know, are you familiar with Alex Saviuk at all?
Yeah, this art looked more familiar to me, and so I looked him up a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, he does the rest of Web of, basically, except for the last couple issues.
Right, yeah.
And as you know, my partner has been collecting all the Web of, so I've looked through it all, and I've been like, oh yeah, this art, I really like the art. I really do. Like Jolie was saying, I love the detail in the backgrounds, but it's not just that too. The like foreground character work is really good. His sense of motion, great actually. Like the swinging, you kind of feel it when Peter's movements panel to panel, and I get that sense. Whereas it was when he's underwater fighting the Spider Slayer, it's kind of wild to me. Like, you get that sense of a plunge and like a struggle. And this one was so easy to read, like flows so well panel to panel, just because the art is so clean and nice, and also shows you how the action's moving with the story. I love that. Spider Slayer, love the Spider Slayer design. I know we're reading like a recolor. Is he pink originally?
I think so.
Because like that's a great choice.
Yeah, I really love the long legs. It's it's a little bit goofy, but also when they're at the bridge, it's like super intimidating still. Like, just to see the like scale of everything compared to Spider-Man, and how he's now taller than the bridge and he's standing at the bottom of the river. Right? Like,
right.
The scale is while the proportions might seem a little goofy, for some reason, that one panel of Spidey swinging under the bridge and him towering over that bridge is like, it made me probably for the first time actually intimidated by the Spider Slayer.
Right.
It gave me like War of the World tripod vibes.
Right.
Yeah.
And anytime anything gives me those vibes, I'm like, good character design, good scary character design.
That's probably what it triggered in my brain.
It looks like he was more purple originally, and this recolor's just up the contrast a lot. It's like a magenta. It's like a pinky purple, I guess.
Also, did Spider-Man swing all the way from like Brooklyn to Pittsburgh?
He got on a plane.
Okay.
He got on a plane.
Yeah, last issue.
He talks about how he spent the rest of his money to get on this plane to go see Mary Jane, which is aw.
Oh, okay.
But also, aw. I guess Mary Jane makes a lot of money, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a supermodel.
yeah. And she does commercials and stuff, and hopefully Peter will move in with her if they're gonna get married, and maybe he can shut up about paying rent. Oh no, are they gonna move in together in her apartment? What about Candy and Bambi and Randy and Sandy and Mandy?
Oh, you'll
Right.
see. They address that soon. Don't worry.
Okay.
They move into
'cause
her
if they're-
building.
Yeah. Because if they're gone, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Okay, with that, so obviously I recommend this. This is yet another classic issue of Spider-Man written by David Michelinie and drawn by Alex Saviuk, so I give it the highest recommendation of classic Spidey. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, this was super fun. I would probably read this one again. I would definitely recommend it to anybody interested in knowing the story of MJ and Peter's engagement. Yeah, it was fun, and I like the Spider Slayer. Alistair Smythe is fun, so
Awesome. G.I. Jolie, what do you think?
I would recommend it too. Not even just as a, beginning to the wedding crap that's eventually going to happen. But I say crap. I haven't read it. I don't know. But it's in Pittsburgh. It's cute. Also, you get a little more Mary Jane. And her sister is kind of like vindicated. Like, you know what I mean? We thought she was just like a weird crook. Like, maybe she did fraud. No, she was just like trying to be daddy's girl, because Mary Jane was always daddy's girl, but no. Find out Philip is scum. Anyway, more Mary Jane family. I recommend.
All right, Bex Luthor.
Yeah, no, absolutely recommend. I'm excited that, like, we got all this Mary Jane backstory too. It's just been like supporting cast backstory week, I guess. I'm really like, don't get me wrong, I love Spider-Man, but I also love the people who love Spider-Man or hate Spider-Man. Like,
Right.
So it's just really cool to get these other stories. It's like, yeah, Spider-Man fights the Spider Slayer in this story, but that's also tied to Mary Jane because she was kidnapped previously by the Spider Slayer, right?
right.
And then Gale, like the whole thing with Gale and her nephews is cute. Her dad's an asshole. It's great. I recommend it.
All right. Okay, with that, we are going to move on to Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 130. This one's called 24 Hours. And just for the record, I bought this off the stand when I was 11 years old. So I have very fond memories of this comic. On the cover here, we have Spider-Man in his black costume carrying Harry Osborn. He's not carrying Mary Jane, he's carrying Harry Osborn. And we have the floating head of Hobgoblin in the background and the floating head of Kingpin at the bottom. It says on the cover here, Spidey's got 24 hours to complete the Hobgoblin's mission or he and Harry Osborn will die. This issue is written by our pal Bob Layton, drawn by Jim Fern, inked by Vince Colletta. It starts off with Spider-Man smashing through a wall into a warehouse and hearing the Hobgoblin laughing. He's looking for Hobgoblin. He wants to find him. He's all pissed off at the Hobgoblin. Finally, he finds him. He appears in the middle of a room with one of those dramatic lights right over top of him. But Hobgoblin is in this like mechanical weird wheelchair with like a leg brace and an arm brace and a neck brace. So he's pretty beat up. But he looks really cool. And basically, Hobgoblin, for the sake of the reader, explains what is going on. And we find out that just 2 hours ago, Harry Osborn received a package, and it was a pumpkin. It was a pumpkin with a note attached to it saying that Harry Osborn has just been poisoned. And there is the only way to get the cure is for wait a minute. Okay, hold on a second. I can't remember exactly how this plays out, even though I've read it 100 times.
He says that he has to get Spider-Man to do something for him, or he won't give him the cure. Yeah,
Spider-Man has to meet the Hobgoblin at the Washington West warehouse.
Yes.
So, and I love this scene. As expected, Osborn, I'm sure called whatever contact he had in order to reach you, probably that wimp Peter Parker. And then he goes, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just simply poison Parker? Well, to be honest, he didn't fit the profile. Unlike Osborn, he's a loner without lots of friends and responsibilities. I couldn't generate as much sheer terror from someone like him. So that's a little plot convenience that's explained right there. That's fine though. So then we flash back to Hobgoblin's original mission was that he was trying to steal this book from some rival gangsters, and we see him breaking into the office of this gangster, and he's melting through a safe, and he grabs the book, but then just at the last minute, he's confronted by these goons, and he jumps out of this window to escape, and just as he's about to land on his Goblin Glider, these guys shoot the Goblin Glider, and it kind of like explodes in the air, so he ends up falling 30 floors, and, you know, smashing off of like balconies as he's falling, like 1, 2, then he just lands on the ground. And I love this sequence here because, you know, even without the explanation, you can see exactly what's going on. So he smashes to the ground, gets up, and he's like, then like later on, he's like, I don't know how long I laid there, blah, blah, blah. So then he wakes up and he basically he makes his way to this warehouse. And since then is where he came up with the scheme for Harry Osborn. So basically now he wants Spider-Man to complete the mission, and that's the only way that Spider-Man is going to get the antidote for Harry Osborn. But to make matters even worse, he throws a pumpkin at Peter or Spider-Man. Spider-Man catches it and he's like, "Guess what? You've just been poisoned too. Ha ha ha! Unless I have the antitoxin, then you're gonna die as well." So then Spider-Man takes off. And as he's like swinging away, we see the laughing, ha 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 ha. So then I love this scene. The first thing Spider-Man does is he goes to visit his pal Dr. Kurt Connors because he thinks maybe Dr. Kurt Connors can help me figure out an antidote. So they actually spend like hours working on this thing, and they show them like looking through the microscope and everything. And basically, it's like, from what I can determine, the toxin is an amazing complex chain of molecules. It would take us, and then Spider-Man's like, I know, 36 hours to create an antitoxin. I'm doomed. I'm just going to have to go through with the plan. So we show that Spider-Man tried to like kind of get a quick, easy way out, but it didn't work. I love that. So then he swings away, and meanwhile we see Harry Osborn sweating by the phone, looking at his kid, you know, talking to Spider-Man, waiting to see what's going to happen. So Spider-Man swings his way to this like yacht where these gangsters are supposed to be. He sneaks his way on, knocks a few of them out, beats a few of them up. He's getting shot at. He's webbing them up, and basically he makes his way to he grabs the book. So now he's got the book, and by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the book is supposed to contain like secrets about the Kingpin, and like it's a ledger. It's a ledger. So this is a very valuable book to people in the underworld. So he ends up getting away from these thugs and then he goes back to Harry Osborn's house in like broad daylight. But when he gets there, some of the gangsters' goons from the yacht are now holding Harry at gunpoint, right? Because they figure that Spider-Man was going to come back there. So he goes in and beats the crap out of them, knocks them all out. And then all of a sudden, who shows up but the Kingpin? The Kingpin of crime is here. So the Kingpin's like, you have the ledger and the location of the Hobgoblin. I am prepared to bargain for both. Name your price. And so Spider-Man is like, so he shows him the paperwork that him and Dr. Connors did. And the Kingpin's like, well, with one phone call, I can have the antitoxin in your hands within 2 hours. And Spider-Man's like, well, how can I trust you? And he's like, I'm offering you a proposition. You return the ledger and punish the Hobgoblin in exchange for your life and the life of your friend. And then he's like, and as a show of good faith, I'll provide you with the antidote first. And Spider-Man says, what makes you think I'll turn over the book once I'm cured? And Kingpin says, I know your kind well. So then Spider-Man, sure enough, gets the antidote. He brings it to Harry Osborn, gives it to him. Then he goes to the warehouse where the Hobgoblin is waiting. And Hobgoblin's like, okay, give me the ledger. And he's like, I'm afraid I can't do that. I already gave it to the Kingpin. He's like, what? So then he starts yelling at Spider-Man. And Spider-Man leaps towards Hobgoblin to attack him. But sure enough, Hobgoblin has raised like a glass shield in between them. And of course, he's got a trapdoor in the floor of the warehouse. So he makes his escape. Ha ha ha. See you later, Spider-Man. So then Spider-Man walks outside and Kingpin is standing there in front of his like limousine. And it's just so cool. He just walks outside and Kingpin's standing there and he's like, you let him escape, didn't you, amateur? I should have known after all, the Hobgoblin's a pro. If nothing else, one should leave vengeance to those whose business it is. And Spider-Man's like, listen, I'm getting sick of being used and abused. He's like, you got your precious ledger back. If I was going to check out, I would have taken Pumpkin Puss and you with me. And as he's swinging away, once again, the Kingpin gets the better out of him, and he's like, amateur. And I freaking love this comic. I love the writing. I love the art. I love the dialogue. I love the twists. I love the plot. I mean, of course, there's probably a million holes I could poke in the plot, but overall, I really like this issue, and it's one of those rare ones that holds up. Josh, what'd you think of this issue?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I didn't like, I don't know. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It's weird that the Kingpin doesn't just go and beat up Hobgoblin, knowing that he's like
again,
all like in a wheelchair.
Plot holes.
Sure. Like it's just, I feel like there's just so many little things. I'm like, why did they do that? Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah,
but it's, I don't know. I feel like I can't quite put my finger on it, but it doesn't have that same like corny charm that the Amazing issue has for me. I feel like, I don't know if it's just too many like weird things happening, or the art definitely is not the same. Mm-hmm. The art is not the best in this one. I think maybe it's the inking. I don't know. I just didn't feel it as much as the Amazing Spider-Man. It's fine. Like, it's not like an awful issue or anything, but yeah, I thought it was just all right.
Okay, one hilarious point. It's the same inker. It's Vince Colletta.
Is it now?
Yeah, it's the same inker. But that's okay. But
then it's definitely the pencils.
Yeah,
it might be. Yeah.
Well, here. Okay, so G.I. Jolie, what'd you think of this issue?
Is this the first time I like all three of them?
Yeah, I think so.
Holy shit.
And it's the end of an era, so I guess they're going out with a bang.
Well, I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Oh.
Because it's like Josh said, it's like not bad, but it's not great. Like, it's not corny, it doesn't have that extra cheese factor. It doesn't have that extra cheese factor that's like doubly entertaining for us all the time. It's just like not a bad story. The ridiculousness of like the and camp of the Hobgoblin, though, definitely exists in this book. My favorite part was probably what you had mentioned, the Hobgoblin falling through the air and being passed out for probably 8 to 10 hours and no one noticing him on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then him picking his sad body up and like crawling to a warehouse to hide out behind plexiglass, which is very relatable right now. And then like it's only revealed that he's done that when Spider-Man jumps at him and is like boom, and like he hits it like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It's like you didn't see any, like there's no lights in that warehouse. There's no terrible lighting where you would see a glare.
Right.
You would 100% notice something like that, like a barricade that's like clear like that. But whatever, it's comic.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what it is that like sometimes the corniness, it's like, I know that these are superheroes. I know this guy is flying around pretending to be a goblin, but it's just like just a little bit past my suspension of disbelief, right? Like the glass being there the entire time, the fact that like all Spider-Man had to do was hold on to this fake pumpkin to be poisoned through the costume. Yeah,
conveniently.
But Hobgoblin handed it to him, right? Like, I don't know. It's just like weird.
He does say he has anti-porous gloves.
Of course. It's just like, I think it's just like small little things where it's like, I don't know. Yeah. I think it's just kind of like everything added up where I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, I do, however, like the whole idea of like all the bad guys in the world are after this one ledger.
Right.
Filled with every name of every criminal in New York, apparently. That's why it's so important. Everyone's after it, including Kingpin. And Kingpin is able to team up with Spider-Man. Like, they come to a compromise to get it. Kingpin, who can't beat Kurt Connors and Spidey, Peter Parker, can't figure out an antidote in time. But in all of the Kingpin's history with crime, he's very familiar with this specific antitoxin. Again, a level of camp that is entertaining. But what is it that he can't do? There's something, it's like he has access to an antidote that he can get to him within 2 hours. But he can't figure out where the freaking Hobgoblin has dragged his carcass. I don't get that part. Like, that's, again, I can suspend my disbelief for anti-porous gloves and toxic pumpkins. But the fact that the Kingpin can't track the Hobgoblin is really, like, come on. Who's the amateur here?
Mm-hmm. Did you like that ending, though? That little comic with the part where Kingpin disses him, though?
It's kind of petty.
Well, yeah, he is the Kingpin.
I mean, yeah, he's a petty guy.
Kingpin is sass.
I loved it. Okay.
Oh my god.
What?
Wait, this is what the gang war should have been about.
A ledger.
This ledger?
Why wasn't the gang war about this ledger? And it would also make sense that the Rose is part of the gang war because he wants the ledger to take down his father.
Again.
Not some... What the heck? This could have been so
didn't
good.
Think about it.
It's such a simple MacGuffin, a book, and look at what you got out of it, right? Like, what a great idea. Anyway,
instead we've got the Hobgoblin in a tank wheelchair behind glass. Apparently, Spider-Man proof glass at that.
And I love how when
Spider-Man
he escaped through the trapdoor, Spider-Man's like, wow, foiled again. Why don't you just figure out a way to follow him? But anyway.
Break the glass, Dan. You're Spider-Man? I don't know if you know.
He's just like, the trapdoor just goes into the basement. There's no way out.
Right.
He's like, trapdoor is my one weakness, clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, Bex Luthor, what'd you think of this issue?
I really liked it. I agree with Mike on the Connors stuff. I love when they team up. I think with the Kingpin, like the stuff at the end where he's like, you couldn't find the Hobgoblin, I think he just couldn't be bothered. It seems more like, you do it and I'll follow you. Like he's like, why would I put more effort into something when I could just blackmail you into doing it for me. That's the kind of vibes that I get from Kingpin, and I love that about him. He's just the biggest, laziest motherfucker.
Yep.
Like, I got all this power and money. Why would I do anything? I really enjoyed it, but I also don't like it. I don't like how, like, Bugs Bunny, the Hobgoblin, is in this. It takes away all his intimidation factor. He just gets shot at and just doof, doof, doof down all these buildings and gets smashed and lies on the ground. I'm just like,
I love that.
okay. I also loved it, but I was like, okay. I think, because this is like the Mercantile version of Hobgoblin now, right?
Well,
so he's just...
No, because it says on page 1, it takes place before Amazing 289, so this is technically Ned Leeds, yeah.
Ned?
Yeah.
So this is technically, as of the continuity at the time, the powerful finger-blasting Hobgoblin.
Yes.
And not Jack-o'-lantern, no superpowers Hobgoblin.
Right.
So that's even worse. That he just gets taken out by a building. Good job, my dude. It kind of like, because the Hobgoblin's always been intimidating, right? It kind of like was like, oh, I have poison pumpkins, ooh, and he's like in a wheelchair with a cast, and like, I'm just like, okay, bud, like, sick prank. That's probably the only part that really bugged me, but don't get me wrong, I really loved watching him hit all the buildings and fall on the ground. It was very enjoyable, a very good comedic time for me. I just think it kind of is like, the Hobgoblin was kind of pulling Spider-Man into more of like a darker, not like darker, but more of a serious tone, I think, versus some of his other kookier villains. Right. You're supposed to be scared of the Hobgoblin. In this, I'm absolutely not scared of the Hobgoblin. And I think I could have forgiven that if it was the Jack-o'-lantern version of Hobgoblin more so than the original Hobgoblin, but whatever.
Right.
I guess it doesn't really matter. I just thought it was like, watching him fall down the buildings is really funny, and then he's just on the big wump on the ground.
Well,
and then
go ahead.
I was just saying, and then Peter's having a conversation with him while he's in a wheelchair in the middle of a warehouse is funny. He's just like, my greatest foe.
Yeah.
Just push him over, dude.
It is weird, yeah, it is weird.
Pull off his mask. You're right there.
A very convoluted setup, but I did still enjoy the issue no matter what. I also have to point out, considering this artist only drew 7 Marvel comics, I actually really liked the art. I really liked it. I don't know, if you look at some of the panels, like the detail in what's his name, Hobgoblin's face, like when he's sitting in the chair on like the first third page, like the detail and the shadows of his face, I thought was perfectly done. The Harry Osborn's reaction when he gets the poison on the pumpkin bomb, I thought that was really well done. To me, it was almost like, at least in the faces, it was like a perfect combination of pencils and inks. It almost reminded me of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez or like an artist named Dan Spiegel at their peaks, like in the 80s. Like, I don't know. I thought this art was really good.
I think that the forms were pretty good at times. I think that the storytelling and the layout is weak in some panels. Sometimes the characters seem weightless and like they're not standing anywhere. They're standing in like an empty void. Even when like Spider-Man and Hobgoblin are standing next to each other in the warehouse and you can see the wall and the floor and all the crates around them, it doesn't feel like Spider-Man is sitting on the floor. It looks like he's floating in midair. Same with Hobgoblin. I can't really tell where they are next to each other in space. So I didn't mind the characters, and like you said, Mike, the faces were in some points particularly really good. It's just that I found myself getting a little bit lost, and then like also some of the panels felt flat because it felt like they took almost like 2 drawings and just kind of like put them next to each other and said, "Yep, Hobgoblin and Spider-Man are standing next to each other." Like I don't feel like they're standing there.
Okay.
But
yeah, there's a good.
I think that's also why I thought maybe it was the inks at first, because it feels like the weight at times is just gone.
Right. Okay. Julie, what do you think of the art?
No, it's fine. It's not the best of the bunch, but it is serviceable.
Okay. And Becca, what'd you think of the art?
Yeah, it's pretty generic to me. Nothing really kind of stands out as particularly interesting. None of Spidey's poses, I'm like, yeah, rad. Like, I'm just like, yeah, there he is. But on like Josh's point, there's a page near the end where Kingpin and Duck Hunters and Spider-Man are all talking, and they're all standing. They're supposed to be standing next to each other, but they're all on different planes. So I'm like, what is happening?
Is that the one where Spider-Man's all caked up?
Yeah, why is so he's got this Spider-Man his butt is just super defined. Everyone's kind of, and Kingpin and Dr. Connors have the same colored outfit, so it's like a little
Kingpin almost
cool.
looks like he's standing on a box. Like Yeah.
And in some panels he's like he comes into the door and he's like matching the door frame height, but in that one he's shorter than both of them. There's just not a whole lot of consistency. I sometimes the Kingpin is massive and sometimes he's very tiny.
Good point. Yeah.
I mean, even the panel next to it, I think, is pretty well done when the three of them are standing next to each other talking. But you're right. It's inconsistent at times too. Yeah.
And I guess that's a sign of being kind of an amateur. So yeah, obviously this artist had room to grow. But again, considering he hasn't really done much, I'm surprised at how good it is. Like, I really enjoyed his art, even if there is some flaws. But anyway, so I
do like the panel.
Oh, go ahead, Becca.
I was gonna say, I do like the panel where, near the end, where Hobgoblin's just in the wheelchair and Spider-Man thunks on the glass and Hobgoblin's just kind of hovering there. Why is he hovering?
Yeah.
Did he steal Xavier's wheelchair? What's
See, that's
going
a
on?
mistake. Yeah, he shouldn't be hovering, but the actual shot of the Hobgoblin looks great, I think. I think he looks great.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, is the characters look good.
Yeah.
And the backgrounds look good, but they're not meshing.
Right.
I think is the issue.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you can really see that too with when Spidey's handing Osborn the antidote. It looks like the camera is pointing at them, like straight on the ground, but the background looks like it's an above shot.
Okay, just a minute. I'm getting back to that.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, I don't have the digital page numbers, but
it's like fifth from the bottom or something like that.
Fifth page.
It's that
from the end?
the last panel on near the end when when Osborn is getting the antidote.
Liz Allen is on that page too. Or is that?
Oh yeah.
Liz Allen?
Okay,
Liz.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's.
Good point.
I think that's why sometimes it just really stood out to me as like not working, confusing at times where people are and like where they are in relation to each other. So
see, I get. Oh, go ahead, Jolie.
I will say the inking is very nice. Now that I'm blasting by that Liz Allen page, look at Liz's hair. It's beautiful. Beautifully inked, I should say.
Like, yeah, even the detail in like Kingpin's face on the last page, like I think it's great. And like people deride Vince Colletta, but I don't know. Sometimes his inking is really good. He gives the art some like a nice texture. And the thing is if you were to compare this, for example, to the issue Web of Spider-Man, the origin of the Rose, again, say what you will about either, but if you came in as a new reader, which one would you rather read? I think I would rather have read this one. Because everything's clear and concise, the storytelling, the dialogue, whereas the Web of Spider-Man is, to me, all over the place, you know? I mean, granted, ideally you wouldn't have come in at the very end of a story for that one, but that's just one small reason why I like this one more. Anyway, I guess that's it. So, what do you guys think? We did the Roger Stern era, we did the Peter David, Tom DeFalco era. Well, that's what this is. This is the end of an era. Peter David's still going to do a few more Spidey comics, and actually Jim Mosley's got a fill-in coming out, but this is pretty much the end. It's going to be a new era starting very soon, so... Any thoughts?
I'm pretty excited because this is around the time that I started reading comics.
Me too.
Like a lot of what I first read was my dad's old comics, and he started collecting like late 80s into the 90s. So this is kind of like the era that I grew up on. So I'm excited to get into this next era.
All right. Well, I should say that next week there's kind of a little in-between period. Next week we're going to be reviewing the classic story. Oh, actually, wait a minute. We haven't even talked. No, first we gotta do the damn wedding. We haven't even talked about that. Next week,
Yeah, they get
be
married.
sure to tune in for the story that's now been retconned, the marriage of Peter Parker and Mary Jane. You gotta read that. You gotta tune in for that one. It's gonna be a big one. We're gonna have special guest Josie joining us again, so that'll be fun. And then after that, we'll be doing Kraven's Last Hunt, and then after that, we'll be doing What's the Matter with Mommy, just so everyone knows what's coming up. And
Great.
yeah, we want to thank G.I. Julie and Bex Luthor for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. I was going to also add, I'm excited because we're starting the era where comic book covers are just incredible. So, like, I'm ready.
All right, good to know.
Instead of just good.
Yeah. All right, Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcast, or you can drop us a line on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you're listening to the podcast. You can comment there. Please let us know what you guys think about the issues we're talking about and the podcast itself. Let's keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, see you later.
Bye.